None of the information in this podcast should be considered medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team. Welcome to the Matcha Guardians podcast, brought to you by Matcha.com. Here we focus on the biggest trending health topics of our time, featuring the greatest and upcoming wellness advocates. Now, here are the Matcha Guardians, certified nutritionist Diana Weil and medical journalist Elara Hadjipateras.
Welcome to this week's episode. I am so excited to talk about this. This is something that Elara and I have had a pact about for, years, something that we checked in every couple months. Hey, how you doing? How you feeling about this? Elara, I'm excited. Are you ready?
I know, Diana. So this is something that before we've hit the record button, we've been discussing before every podcast. So exciting that we finally get to share it with you. Diana and I are both pregnant. We are pregnant. So this is our pregnancy podcast. We're both first-time moms. So we thought, what could be more fun than just kind of bringing you all through our journey of becoming pregnant, the experience of being pregnant, what was expected, what was unexpected, surprises, scary moments along the way. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. This is our favorite question we ask each other, and it's amazing. And I think that even if you're pregnant or not, everyone should ask you this question. Instead of how are you doing, how are you feeling, Diana?
I actually remember when I was like, hey, Laura, how's pregnancy going? And you were like, I love it because everyone asks how I'm feeling. So I just want to preface this by saying that we are filming the beginning of November, and I am very early in my pregnancy. I'm 7.5 weeks pregnant, and Elara is
7.5 months pregnant.
So very different experiences. So I'm feeling not great, to be honest. I feel nauseous. I am you guys, I love vegetables. Like I eat vegetables. I have lived off white bread for the last week and a half. That is all I eat is white bread. So I don't feel amazing, but we'll get into a little bit more of that later. Elara, how are you feeling?
Today I'm feeling fabulous, and I had leftover linguine and clams as my breakfast this morning. So yes, the carb train reigns supreme all through 3 trimesters. At least I can say that for me. I remember when I was in my first trimester, I loved oyster crackers. You know those little puffy crackers that you throw into chowder or soup? I just always grab them at the buffet at the Whole Foods just to get a couple of those. And it's good to just have them at different times of day, because I also found in the beginning it's important to graze, right? Like small meals, eating a little bit too much at once can be overwhelming, but let's rewind the track a little bit and maybe tell our listeners a little bit about how we ended up here. I mean, I know that you guys all know how we ended up here. We have husbands and one thing leads to another, but let's get into the nitty gritty of it a little bit here. So Diana, should I go first since I'm farther along the way?
Okay, I think definitely I want to hear your story. And I just want to preface this by saying I'm hoping today we can talk about our journeys and also kind of get into the taboos of pregnancy and expectations and just dive into maybe all the areas that people are afraid to talk about in pregnancy, because there are, I'm new-ish to this journey, and I'm already whoa, that is not good information. So everyone listening, I'm hoping that we can share our journeys with you and then also get into all the stuff that you want to say out loud, but maybe you're afraid to. Okay, Elara, tell us your journey, please. Share it.
Okay, so I have been with my husband for about 8 years. We've been married for 3 years. We had a COVID wedding, which was wonderful. And then my husband was in an MBA program, so we thought, that's not exactly the best time to be having a baby. We were the type of couple who I would say overplanned. We haven't been trying, for example, since we got married. We were kind of all right, let's take this time to enjoy being married, focus on our careers a little bit, get down, work, and then, we'll go for the pregnancy journey come 2023. So fast forward, right? Or I guess let's actually rewind the track, right? So last fall, I would say I was ready to start trying then. My husband was not. He kind of had a very hard line of the earliest we're going to start trying is going to be March. Because if we start trying in March, his MBA program he was graduating from was in August. He figured there was no way that any baby would pop into the picture or cause any complications before he graduated and while he was writing his thesis. He just thought, I want to be able to support you through your pregnancy and be there. And he was realistic with himself. he had to focus on his thesis. It was very stressful. He's also working full time at the same time. So we said, okay, let's wait until.
We love a supportive partner, by the way. So sweet.
We love a supportive partner. I think that makes a huge difference. So I originally went off. I've been on contraceptive, like a oral birth control for the last 10 years, I want to say. Long time. So one of the things I had heard is that it was good to get off of my contraceptive medication a couple months before we actively started trying to kind of clear out my system. So I went off of a contraceptive in November of last year. And then I used an app. Do you remember what the app was?
Is it Natural Cycles? Yeah, that's the one that I used.
Natural Cycles. Yeah, so we started using Natural Cycles, and we just practiced safe sex in regards to not having any unprotected sex around the times that I was most likely ovulating, right? So tried and true. We also, not to be crude, used the pull-out method, which, for us, it worked. Natural Cycles, avoiding those kind of like, red alert days and pulling out, that's what we did, right? So we did that for November, December, January, February, April, March. We went on a trip to Japan. It was like the first time that we had really done any big traveling. It was for my husband's work, but we went on a nice vacation. We enjoyed ourselves. We had a lot of sake. I think I probably put on a few pounds on vacation, which is, it's what you should do. That's one of the other tips that I got before getting pregnant, actually from my father, who's a general practitioner. He said, I know that you're a health fanatic and you usually are on the lean side, but you want to have a little bit more weight to you. That just makes it's a bit easier to get pregnant. So we got back from Japan. And at the time, I was flying back and forth to London. So I remember the exact weekend that it happened, which I don't know if that's the case for most people, but it was like Peter had to stay in Japan an extra week and a half to work on a ship. He works in shipping, which could be its own episode entirely. But so Peter comes back from Japan. I'm back from London. We're together one weekend. And then a couple weeks later, it's 2 days before my 32nd birthday. And I'm on the phone with my brother, and I'm like, I've been kind of feeling a little off lately, a little strange. And my brother knew that we were going to start, trying come the end of March when we got back from Japan. And he went, yeah, you should probably take a pregnancy test. That's usually what people do. So I went over to the pharmacy, grabbed a couple tests, and, took it thinking it's totally not going to be positive. And boom, it was positive. We were a one-hit wonder. It happened right away, which was kind of a shock for us because I had buffered in thinking it would take at least 6 months because that's what I read online. I thought that was going to be our timeline. Nobody plans to have a Christmas baby.
We had discussed that. We were like, the only time we are not going to have babies around is Christmas, New Year's. And what does she do?
Yep.
She has a Christmas, New Year's baby.
Right. But I will say now it's actually a great thing. Maybe this is me just finding the silver lining and I'm just a hopeful optimist, is that now I get to have my baby in the wintertime when everyone's really cozy and we're all really wearing big coats and there's less exciting things going on. And then by the time the summer comes around, the baby will be able to have his head up and I'll be in a little bit better shape than I will be, say, like a couple weeks after pregnancy. So I'd say it worked out. So in a nutshell, it was kind of like happened right away. It was a little unexpected. And here I am 7.5 months later. But let's just turn it over to you.
Okay, so totally opposite experience. Totally, if we could 0 to 100, totally opposite experience. So very similar. Elara and I had chatted about, maybe a year ago about being like, hey, in the fall, we're going to get pregnant. And then I had some job changes, some insurance changes, and we decided, it's probably not the right time. I had also had an IUD for I don't know, I've been on birth control since I was 16 and I'm 32 now, so forever. So, it was kind of like, okay, I think we're just going to hold off for a little bit. But when I first started dating my husband, week 4 into dating, he was like, hey, I think that I'm infertile. And I was like, that's future Diana's problem. I really like you. I think you're very cute. I'm going to deal with that later. So, it kind of always been in the back of my mind that maybe we were going to have problems having kids. And as the date quickly approached of I'm going to take out my IUD, I'm going to, get my cycle back. I'm going to learn what my cycle is because I haven't had a period since I was 16. I started thinking, there is a valid concern here. And everyone told us it only takes one sperm. You guys are totally fine. Try for a year. Don't stress about it. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't think that that's true. I think that there is a valid concern here, and I don't think it makes sense to wait a year if we suspect that there's something wrong. So I had made doctor's appointments for both of us, for me to get my IUD out, and for my husband. He hadn't had blood work done in forever, and I'm a big proponent of, go get your blood checked, see what's going on with your health. And I just put it out to him. I didn't force him. I just said, hey, we've agreed that we're going to maybe start trying for a baby. You're concerned about if you're fertile, and if you want to have an opportunity, this is an opportunity to talk to the doctor. So he goes in, and I think that we're very blessed here, because I think a lot of times people are very dismissive about fertility struggles if you haven't been trying for a full year. They say, try for a full year, come back to us. But my husband's, the doctor that he saw had something, I can't remember what it was, but he had to have a procedure in order to have children. He didn't have any sperm. So they went in, they fixed something. So I think that he was very receptive to kind of listening to Harley's story and Harley's concern. So he immediately sent Harley in for a semen analysis. So Harley, had to give him a collection of a semen, which is a whole, got a lot of jokes about that one.
Can we have the husbands? I think we have to do a husbands podcast once the kids are here to just kind of get
it's definitely. I know. I can't wait for him
story.
to listen to this. So he did a semen analysis, and he came back with nothing. There was no sperm. There was he had no sperm. So, that led us on the path of can we have kids? Do we adopt? Do we have a sperm donor? What do we do? And it's taken us about, I guess we started in January. It's November now. So, I'm 7 weeks pregnant. But here we are, and I am pregnant. He had to have his testicles cut open and had to have sperm extracted, but we got them. We went through IVF. We had a very lucky experience in terms of, the first time worked. We had a successful egg retrieval. Both of our egg and sperm were high quality, so they fertilized really well. And it's been, I say, when people ask me how IVF has been, it's both better and worse than I thought it was going to be, because it happened and we're here and we're pregnant, and that makes me emotional just thinking about it. And the hormones were intense, and I gave myself a lot of shots, but it also was not as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be. So in terms of, I think Elara and I both have opposite experiences, but one thing that I really love about both of our journeys is that, we were kind of deep in our infertility struggles when Elara told me that she was pregnant. And I was just so excited for her. I was just I think it's because I'm pregnant, but I'm getting emotional. I was so, when she called me, I don't know, I think I was in the first couple people that she told. And I was just thrilled for you. And you have been there every single step of the way, every single shot that I've taken, every breakdown I've had. You've been you know what? It's gonna happen. It's gonna be okay. And I really love that even though we had very different experiences, we were both able to be there and support each other.
I think I called you the day I found out, a couple hours after I took my pregnancy test, because I have zero self-control and just love sharing good news. And that was before I even told Peter. I think I was like, hey, guess what? And you guessed it before I even said it. You're like, you're pregnant.
Knew. And I think same for you. I think I texted you that it was positive before I even told Harley. And I was like, it happened. It worked.
This is great. So Diana, I knew what day she was going in and got, the embryo implanted.
Which, by the way,
her.
I didn't even tell my own mother that. Elara knew, but no one else in my family did.
Gonna make me cry. I knew the day, but then when was it? A week later, we were on our weekly work content call with, the whole team, right? So this is a call with 9 people. And Diane and I notoriously, for better or worse, we tend to message each other while we're on a conference call. I mean, who doesn't? And so she just sends me a picture of her positive pregnancy test, and I just immediately start crying. And I don't normally start crying, right, on a Google Hangout call. So immediately we start getting Slack messages from our boss being like, girls, this is very unprofessional. What's going on? And of course, I was in no position to be, telling Diana's news, which brings me to the point of, how do you tell people about it? When are you supposed to tell people about it, right? There's kind of taboos around this that I've heard.
I mean, you and I I think did what everyone says not to do. They say don't
100%.
tell anybody until you're in your second trimester. And that's because the risk of miscarriage, right? That if something goes wrong, you don't want people to know. Can you start us off with why did you not follow that advice? And just kind of how did it feel for you?
Well, I was just excited. And I guess for me, I just thought, for better or worse, I wanted the people that I loved along for the journey with me. In my mind, if I hadn't told anyone and I, God forbid, did suffer a miscarriage, that would be a really hard thing to go through alone, right? Especially when you're working with someone and you're talking to them really intimately on a day-to-day basis. They're going to tell that something is off. So then, I almost feel like that's worse, right? After the fact, actually, 3 months ago when I was feeling off this or that, I was going through that alone. And in my experience, when I have heard friends choose to go that route and they have suffered miscarriages, it's led to some really trying times for couples because, right, they're the only two people who know in the whole world, in the whole planet. And that's a lot of pressure to put on your partner. So I guess that was my take. And I was just excited. I mean, I was pumped. I was excited. I was like, the sound of music, I would be running in the prairie field, just like telling everybody I was pregnant. And it's funny, my father and my brother, who are both physicians, one's a psychiatrist, one's a general practitioner, were both recommending to me outside of my immediate friend circle, right? Kind of my 5 closest friends and my family. They said, don't say anything until you have an ultrasound at around 6 weeks where you hear the heartbeat. That was their recommendation. So at that point, I think I started telling like an outer layer. And then, of course, my parents couldn't help themselves. And I started getting congratulations, text messages from aunts and uncles being like, congratulations on the baby, which, Diana, I think you actually had an even better experience than I did in that department, right?
Yeah, well, so I just want to back up a little bit. So it's funny because going through IVF, they tell you kind of like, hey, don't talk about this with it's not that that's outwardly said, but a lot of people going through IVF don't share that they're going through IVF. And Harley and I were both very early on decided that that wasn't the approach that we were going to take. And I actually give this up to Harley because, there was this sort of in this beginning, it was like, this is Harley's medical concern and is it my thing to share, And I loved what he said. He said, I feel like if we keep it a secret, it's something that we're shameful of. And I don't want to feel ashamed of this. And so we were really open about the fact that we went through IVF, which I will say did make it a little bit difficult to then keep any of it secret because everyone knew that we were going through IVF. And even though I told people so early that we were pregnant, I feel the same way that you do, that IVF was really intense and I was emotional and my body was doing weird things. And I cannot imagine not having the support of my family and friends through that, and also like not having the grace. Like I went to a workout class and I think that there was a song by Stevie Nicks playing and I just was sobbing. Like I just had so many hormones running through my body. Like I needed the grace for people to be like, oh, this is what's going on with her and let me help her through this, rather than being like, why is this girl sobbing in a Stevie Nicks song? And I felt the same way about pregnancy. It was like, pregnancy's hard, and first trimester, that's all that I've gotten. That's all that I'm at right now. But it sounds like first trimester is kind of a butt kicker. And I don't like, how do you get through that without people understanding what's going on for you? So, I respect people who are more private than we are. I am very bad secret keeper, at least for my own secrets. I like to think I can keep other people's secrets, but I'm not a good secret keeper. That being said, what Elara is alluding to is that we told some family that we were pregnant, and we are just sort of keeping it among like family, friends, and like half of the world, but we haven't told the other half of the world yet. And they were so excited, they immediately posted it on Facebook, which is like, if I look at it from the perspective of you're just very excited that it's like not a biggie, but then the other hand, it's like, but that's my news. I wanted to share that. And I don't know if you felt that. You were like, I wanted to be the one to tell my aunt and uncles that I was pregnant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think my mother ended up telling me that one of my uncles was offended that I hadn't called him yet. And I was like, how would I have called him yet if I haven't even told my in-laws? Like,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
there's a pecking order here that has to be, cross your T's, dot your I's.
Peter?
So the way I told Peter was, at the time I was living in Denmark. I was living in Copenhagen, and I spent a lot of time with my 9-year-old neighbor named Rainey, who I would babysit. And so Rainey would often come over to my house to walk the dogs with me. And so Rainey came over, we went for a dog walk. I told her, I was pregnant. And I asked her, I went, how do you think I should do it? And I have these 2 giant chalkboards that I used to have hanging in my kitchen back in Denmark. So she helped me write, I am pregnant in Danish, which I knew my husband would have no idea what it said, which kind of made it better. So me and Rainey, she wrote, I am gravid is Danish for pregnant. So she wrote the message in Danish, and then we drew a rainbow. And then I put at the bottom, you can say I told you so, ... Because my husband always joked that he was like, it's going to happen right away. Like, that it's going to happen right away. And I was like, no. Statistically speaking, that's a ridiculous notion. And then what I did is I had an arrow pointing to the room next door to where the chalkboard was. And I had taken like 4 or 5 pregnancy tests. I'd placed all the tests in a box that also said, I am pregnant in Danish. So he came home from work. I didn't feel like I could tell him on the phone, even though I told a couple of people on the phone before he came home. He came home from work and he sits in the kitchen and he kind of stares at the chalkboard and doesn't register what it says. He's like, what's that? And I was like, I don't know. What do you think it is? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, follow the arrow. I kind of had to spoon feed him it a little bit. I was like, follow the arrow, like go this way, go this way. And he wasn't really connecting the dots. And he goes in the room and he's like, why am I in this room? And I was like, the box, open the box. So then he opens the box and he looks at the first test and he just was like, I told you so. And I was like, I know, I told you that you could say that. And he was like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, pretty sure. I took 5 of those. I'm like, you can see them all there.
I love that.
That's what I told him.
So one thing that I love for you, I love your journey, or I don't know, maybe you just are very stoic. I feel like you've had a pretty wonderful pregnancy. Like every day I'm like, hey, Elara, how you doing? And she's like, you know what? I love this. I feel good. And one thing I know that 3rd trimester is probably a little bit harder than what you were experiencing. But one thing that we've talked about that I kind of want to get into is that you've had a really good pregnancy. And we've kind of talked about how when you're with someone who maybe is having a harder pregnancy, that you feel the need to complain about pregnancy or that you like can't talk about how good it's been for you. And I don't know. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that or how that experience has been for you.
So absolutely. I love being pregnant. Let me just say it right now. I love it. I could do it lots of times over. I mean, maybe speak to me after the birth, but as of right now, I've really genuinely enjoyed it. I have maintained my workout regimen. I'm still, to my father's dismay, doing CrossFit classes up to 4 times a week. I can't do certain activities like I used to be able to, but I love breaking a sweat. I love pushing myself. I haven't experienced any morning sickness. I'm so sorry, Diana. I had like a few kind of headaches in the 1st trimester, but overall, I guess to preface this, before I went on my pregnancy journey, I was a bit of an on and off smoker, and I would occasionally, drink more often than not. And I think since being pregnant and since being sober, I have reflected and realized how much of those habits made me feel bad. Like a lot of the times when I used to have headaches or anxiety or stomach aches, it had to do with those bad habits that I had. So just not having those anymore, I've felt really good. And then I think the other side of the coin is that because we had such an easy time getting pregnant, I think there is a little part of me subconsciously that feels like I don't have a right to complain. Like it's been so easy, right? What could I possibly have to complain about, right? When people are going through IVF, when people are suffering miscarriages, like how, I don't know, right? So maybe there's something deep inside me that I don't think that I have a huge pain threshold. So I really do think I have had just an easy pregnancy. I don't feel like I can complain. I don't have a right to complain, which, maybe I could give myself a little bit more grace and I could be a little bit less hard on myself. But overall, I've been really happy and I'm just grateful. And another part of my pregnancy journey, I guess I didn't share in the beginning of the podcast, is that this part might make me get emotional. Diana probably knows where I'm going, is that my husband and I, we've been together for 8 years. And, since the first time I laid eyes on him, I knew he was my guy. I wanted him to be my baby daddy. we got accidentally pregnant back in 2017. And I found out, 2 months. And we decided to terminate the pregnancy because it didn't make sense at the time. And both of us are very career oriented. And I think I had this little thing in the back of my head, this voice that was telling me, because I made that decision so many years ago, that I'd get punished, when the time came around that I was ready. And so there's a bit of that element too of I have a guilt factor of that. And I'm just really grateful for this opportunity and that it's been so smooth.
Oof. I just have like chills and I want to give you a hug. And I'm like, not to sound too therapist-y, but I so appreciate your vulnerability because I think I knew that about you, but I didn't know if that was something that you would share. And I think that helps normalize so many things for people and is really important for people to hear. And like, just this idea that you would be punished for it. I just love you, and your little baby to come is so lucky to have you as a mama.
Oh, thank you. I love you too. I appreciate that. And yeah, I was really hard on myself for a couple of years, and my husband and I, went through a period of not knowing if we wanted to have kids. And I was really envious of my friends that seemed to just land on either side of the fence, like no kids, live it up, have lots of savings, go on amazing trips, or the ones that were like, yep, we're having 3 to 4 and we're going to start now. We kind of had a few years where it was like, I don't know, like we'll see. And I think subconsciously, maybe I always did want to have kids, and it was more of my husband who was on the fence about it. And I love him so much that I just didn't want to be in a position where I felt like I had to choose, right? Like that's a really hard choice that I hope no one, has to make, but sometimes I understand that you do need to make that hard choice. And, I guess don't beat yourself up over it. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a second chance, a third chance, or fourth chance down the line.
Yeah, isn't that so interesting? Because I think Harley and it was one of those conversations that we had early on, when he was like, hey, I'm infertile. Like, do you want to have kids and do you want to get married? And we both agreed. But I think for both of those things, I was ready before he was. And it's interesting, I think, when that happens, because obviously you want your partner on board. This is a two-way thing. Like we got to agree on this together. But what do you do when one of you is ready? And I think, Harley and I had a lot of conversations of like, hey, I can't wait forever. Like my body has, I do have a time clock, and I am 32, which I know is still relatively young, but it's actually not when you look at fertility. And it is kind of this interesting, like, I didn't want to push him into having kids, but we also had to have some like tough conversations of, you would probably wait until you were 50, which I don't know if Peter's the same way, but like realistically, like they're like, hey, let's wait till we're 50. And I'm like, that doesn't work for my body. So I think that those are also really tough conversations to have. And I don't know that I have an answer for everyone. To be totally honest, like there were a couple nights that I was in tears with Harley because I was like, this isn't going to happen. And, like, I want to have babies. And I don't know if you and Peter ever experienced that. And I will say we're both, obviously, Harley split his balls open for this. So he is in full agreement and ready to have kids. But those are also really hard. Nothing about this process is easy. And I just, whatever someone's journey is, like, you've had a really wonderful pregnancy and you got pregnant the first time, but you also had to deal with the decision to terminate a pregnancy. And, like I had to go through IVF. I don't know a single person who just had a lovely, wonderful birth, pregnancy. Like you're going to have struggles, and whatever your struggles are going to be personal to you. And I think leaving as best you can guilt and shame out of that experience is, I think, my best advice, and having conversations with your partner and,
Yeah. And pregnancy, it's a roller coaster of emotions. Before you get pregnant, while you're pregnant, I'm sure after you get pregnant, you kind of just have to ride the ride and enjoy it a little bit. It's a bit of breathless excitement, as I like to say, aka fear.
Because I cannot catch my breath.
Well, oh my gosh. So Diana knows the other day we were filming another episode, and I have 2 Australian shepherds that are very vivacious, and one started barking while we were recording. So I had to, I wouldn't even say I had to run. I just kind of grabbed her and put her towards the other side of the house so you wouldn't hear her barking. And by the time I came back to the desk and sat down, I wanted to just get right back into it. Our producer, John, had to stop the recording and interrupt me because I was so flushed in the face and could hardly breathe that it would be very obvious to listeners that I was out of breath. So that is, oh my gosh, that's the symptom that nobody tells you about.
So that was my first symptom. That's actually how I knew that it had worked, that our IVF round had worked. Because
Really?
I was like, yes, I was on a dog walk and I do this dog walk every day. And it was the smallest little baby hill. And I was like, so out of breath.
I know. Hills, stairs, new appreciation. I used to love the Stairmaster. I could do, 30, 40 minutes on the Stairmaster. Oh my gosh, I would die. I would die. So this brings me to, let's go over the symptoms nobody tells you about according to trimester. So starting with the first.
Okay, well, I can only talk about the first. So you'll have to be our expert for the second and third. The heart rate thing was wild for me. I was not, like, everyone talks about being nauseous. And I was like, okay, I'm ready for the nausea. I did not realize that I was going to be out of breath at all times. I've had headaches, which I also did not realize was like a pregnancy thing. I think that that's something that you experience. My dreams are so vivid. And then these are a little bit more personal, but the constipation, such a real thing.
Yes, strange. I've always had a very easy system, so to speak. That was
a bit of a shock. And then also, like, there's a little bit more passion, you know? You know what I mean? Like, there's a little
lust, right? Like, the girls are getting bigger, the breasts are growing, and you feel sexy, you're pumping with hormones. Totally agree. So I definitely had an increase in sex drive, honestly, throughout the whole pregnancy. But increase in sex drive while being constipated. Wow, isn't that amazing? My first tell being pregnant was passing gas, farting. I never crop dust. I am just not a crop duster by any means. And it was like a week and a half before I took my pregnancy test. And I remember I was over in London and I was opening up a pop-up for my company and I was passing gas. I mean, it was embarrassing. I had to make trips to the bathroom just to pass gas. I was like, what is going on with me? And I remember just kind of mentioning it in passing when we were packing up one night and my boss was like, oh, maybe you're pregnant. And I was like, no, that's a silly notion. So yeah, constipation, farting, very crazy, vivid dreams. I wish that I had started keeping a dream journal, which I've already told you before. Highly recommend it. Over Googling things.
My entire Google is
the same thing over and over again. It's disturbing. Yeah. The amount of times that you read, by how many weeks does the risk of miscarriage go? It's like nonstop. And then sense of smell. Particularly, I remember I hated the smell of bleach. It smelled like dirty cat litter to me.
Pregnancy is weird. It really is. It's a strange thing.
All right. So second trimester, which I know you're not in yet, but I think we've gone over some of these things, is that the second trimester is kind of this weird time where your bump isn't quite pronounced, but you're growing. So insecurities about bump size is definitely one of the symptoms nobody tells you about. And you're just constantly Googling and being like, what's the normal bump size at week whatever? And you keep reading everybody's bump is different. Doesn't stop you. You'll keep comparing the size of your bump and stuff. Your bra size significantly changes, so you have to go out and buy new bras. I had back acne, which now I think is linked to the testosterone of having a boy. So that was not great. I was not into that. And then this is a really, I know gross one, but different smells down there. However you normally smell, things are changing. And you're aware of it. I think it's, you have that hyper sensitive smell. So I felt like I needed to shower 2 or 3 times a day. And I'd literally make my husband smell me. I'd be like, do you smell me? And he'd be like, you don't smell. And I was very self-conscious about it. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, which nobody told me about, leaking nipples.
Yeah, that was new. I didn't know that until you were like, hey, Diana, guess what's happening to my body?
And the way I found out was not great. It was my husband told me. He's like, hey, Elara, by the way, your nipples are leaking. And I was like, what? This is so weird. And he had actually, to his credit, had done some reading on pregnancy. And he was not surprised. He was like, it's totally normal. It's a good thing. It means that you'll have strong, milk production. This is called colostrum. So that was, Peter shined in that moment. And then for the third trimester, even crazier dreams, believe it or not. And then, pregnancy brain frog. See, I can't even speak because of it. Pregnancy brain frog. Brain frog. Pregnancy brain fog. I cannot tell you how much like trouble I have concentrating sometimes, and I'm just much more forgetful. And I've become a big fan of using reminders on my phone. And last week I even left my phone in my refrigerator. Like, who does that? It's ridiculous. And my feet are bigger now. I now am a size 10 in sneakers.
This really is the Diana and Elara tell-all. That was amazing. You had me laughing the whole time.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so there's a lot of symptoms. I will also say that because I'm doing an IVF pregnancy, they are making me supplement with progesterone until 10 weeks pregnant. So we did a natural cycle, which means that they let my body ovulate naturally, and then we timed our transfer with that. So if you do a medicated transfer, which most people end up doing, you have to do a very big shot of progesterone right in your butt. And I really wanted to do the natural. So I'm taking an oral progesterone, but I do think that that has sort of influenced maybe some of my symptoms. But just to jump topics here a little bit, I kind of want to get into the pregnancy taboos because there's a lot of them. And just speaking of Google, like there were a lot of times when I was, obviously I knew that we were trying to have a baby. And so I started like looking at skincare and looking at all these different things. And so I would Google like, can I keep using my little zit cream that has salicylic acid in it? And can I do this? And can I do that? And can I do that?
And can I still do Botox?
Can I still do Botox? So all these different things. And I think that the first reaction, people are so afraid of pregnant women. Like they're just the risk of a pregnant woman, the liability is terrifying. So people just say no automatically. But yeah, so let's get into it because I got a lot to say about this topic.
Okay. First taboo thing I'm going to cover is pregnancy weight gain. When you Google how much weight you should gain during pregnancy, it says 25 to 35 pounds. Your girl here has gained 50 pounds and counting, and it is completely normal. Totally, totally normal. Very healthy baby. Yes, he's on the bigger side. As my doctor says, he is no peanut, but I think there's a huge misconception out there in terms of pregnancy weight gain, and that's not something to hyperfixate on.
Totally.
By any means. Yep. And another thing is that, usually you're told that you shouldn't gain any weight during your first trimester and to, slowly start gaining a half pound and then a pound into the second and third. Everybody is different. Every pregnancy is different. For example, a lot of people don't realize that if they're having twins and they don't necessarily know they're having twins until, let's say, 8 weeks, right? When they might get their first ultrasound. It's quintessentially important to nourish yourself as much as you can in the first trimester with twins to avoid a preterm labor. So you should be having an increased caloric content of 1,000 calories a day. So what can I say? I erred on the side of caution, right? And just in case there were twins in there. But yeah, pregnancy weight gain, taboo. You can gain more than 25 to 35 pounds. What's wonderful is when you get to my stage of pregnancy, when you step on a scale, your belly blocks the number. So, I think that just says it all, right?
I love that. Okay, so in terms of skincare, I want to get into this a little bit because I think that we get really afraid of skincare. And I will say I am not using retinol anymore because of the vitamin A. I did research on a lot of the stuff like salicylic acid and all those things, all the letters that go in.
The acids.
Thank you. The acids, all the letters that are in skincare.
Yes.
And if you are using them in moderation, do what you will. But I feel comfortable using these in moderation after the research that I've done. I am not going to ingest salicylic acid. Am I going to put a little drop on a zit that I have? Yes. Is that harming my baby? No. I think that there are things to be cautious of. And I think that we just are overly cautious about a lot of those things. And we just don't want high amounts of retinols and salicylic acids and all the acids. But I think a small moderation is like, you're not doing any harm.
I agree with that. For me, I've always had a pretty mellow skin regimen. I have a tried and true skin regimen that I like, that I already use an organic line that doesn't have a lot of added fragrances to begin with, because I already have quite sensitive skin. So I have noticed overall, my skin has gotten more sensitive during pregnancy. I've never been the type to use retinol. But I'm a big fan of getting facials quite routinely. Like that's been one of my big self-care things I've done for myself throughout my pregnancy, and I highly recommend it, is getting a facial or getting a massage once a month. And I've had some reactions to the more intense masks that they put on me. They even did one where I did a mommy massage where they put a mask on my belly, and I had a bit of a reaction that I remember my belly was red for a day. And also like essential oils. So you would think, or at least I thought that essential oils like lavender would be a good thing while pregnant. Actually, in my experience, it has not been the case. For example, this might be TMI, but right, that's where we're going. I'm a big fan of baths, and I love bath bombs. And I love lavender bath bombs, like organic bath bombs. Like I can no longer use them since halfway through the second trimester, around like when I was at like 20 weeks. It is like I have a flash UTI for 15 to 30 minutes after I use the bath bomb. So I completely stopped doing that. I use a very specific body wash now that I don't react to. So that's something I've definitely changed. And then before I got pregnant, I used to do a little bit of Botox here and there. And that's something that I have not done since I started. Even though I wouldn't necessarily say I'm against it. For me, the way I guess I replaced my Botox is I've just done more preventative skincare, i.e. facials. And that's made me feel really good.
I didn't feel good about the Botox. I felt like I was like, I'm okay with a little bit of salicylic acid. I do feel like trying to minimize fragrances, getting organic skincare, like I'm on board with all of that stuff. I think that that's just to reduce the chemicals that are I think someone told me that they tested a placenta and there was like over 200 chemicals in the placenta. So like I am trying to reduce, like household cleaning supplies and all that kind of stuff, just the chemicals. While I feel okay about some skincare, for me, Botox, it was hard to justify that. Do I miss it? Yes. Am I sad that I can move my forehead? I am.
Yeah. That is a small benefit. Okay. So now going into food taboos. Is there anything that you've stopped eating since you became pregnant?
No, all the foods.
Or drinking. I should say eating and drinking.
I'm not drinking alcohol. I do feel very strongly that you probably shouldn't drink in your first trimester. I'm going to say, again, a little taboo here, but I think it's okay. Okay, it's not great, but I think you can have like a sip of wine or a very small glass of wine, especially in your third trimester. I do feel like the first trimester, that's when everything is developing and growing. And so I'm not having any alcohol. Most of the things that they say not to eat are, like sushi and meat and those things. And I don't eat those anyways, like deli meats. I feel okay about soft cheeses. I just think that the risk of listeria is so small that I'm not avoiding soft cheeses. And then otherwise, those foods don't really apply to me. But I do kind of want to get into the deli meats and the sushi and all that kind of stuff, which I think, you should talk about because I do know that you do eat meat and fish.
I do eat meat and fish. And I would say that I was the most careful as far as what I was eating during the first trimester of pregnancy. And that tends to be the case for most people, right? Because that's when you don't know what's going on. You don't look obviously pregnant from the outside. It's especially as a first-time mom, you don't want to do anything wrong. So you play it safe, right? You want to play it by the books. That way, God forbid anything happens, you don't feel like you were at all responsible for that. So I didn't have any deli meats. I didn't have any sushi during my first trimester. But once I crept into the second trimester, if I went to a restaurant, there was a reputable restaurant where I knew I was going to get quality sushi, sashimi, I've had it. I wouldn't overdo it because I didn't want to overdo the mercury content, but I would have it. I had a glass of champagne the day that my husband graduated from his MBA program. I was around 19 weeks at that time, and I had just done the abnormalities scan 3 days before, which let me tell you, like in terms of stressful moments during your pregnancy, that's definitely one of the hurdles to get over. And once I had gotten through that and you kind of saw, okay, like, the main structure, the organs, like everything is normal and good. It's okay to, take a step back and, maybe reward yourself a little bit. So I went through a phase of deeply craving bologna and cheese sandwiches on like Wonder white bread towards the later part of my second trimester. And I had a couple and they were delicious. And I guess the one thing I'll note is that I am not a medical professional. This is what I've done during my pregnancy journey. So by no means am I telling you to throw all of the advice that you might be reading or you might be getting from your healthcare provider out the window, right? It's your body, your choice, your pregnancy journey. Always check in with a trusted healthcare provider before you make any of these decisions. Obviously, one of the things I noted before is that I have had a relatively easy pregnancy up to this point. So I checked in with my father, who's a general practitioner. I kind of asked his advice about these things, and he gave the okay before I went down this route, just so you know. So if you're kind of on the fence about something, or you're having this, big craving that you feel like may not be necessarily safe, just talk with your healthcare provider, like, before you make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, all the things that I feel okay about, the only reason I feel okay about is, one, because I have done the research and I feel comfortable taking those risks. And I think it's really important to speak to a healthcare provider, but also, maybe dive a little bit deeper into research and learn for yourself why maybe that recommendation is given or why it's not given.
Yep. Another one that people consider stopping a lot is drinking coffee, having caffeine. According to the recommended daily intake for pregnant women in the US, they say don't go over 200 milligrams a day. So I have had a couple iced coffees here and there throughout my pregnancy, and I have 2 cups of matcha every day. And once again, that's just been my prerogative. What's interesting about the caffeine recommendation for pregnant women is that it's vastly different depending on what country you're in. So in Denmark, for example, it's a bit higher than the 200 milligrams. But I kind of err on the side of caution, and I don't tend to go over 150 milligrams. I was, once again, especially strict, I'd say, the first half of my pregnancy, and I've become a bit more lenient in my later weeks.
Yeah, that's how, I feel like I do feel pretty strict about in the first trimester, and I feel like, closer towards the third is when maybe I feel comfortable loosening up. So one resource that I want to share that I think Elara I shared with you, I love this woman. Everything that she does is based on data. So if you are interested, she did a whole thing about sushi and pregnancy. And I really trust the things that she says because she is an economist. She has a whole website that is based on, people asking questions. Her name is Emily Oster, Oster. So check her out if you are, if you just are interested about pregnancy and what is data driven versus what is just people being overly cautious.
And we'll link to her website in our show notes below. So another thing I think would be interesting to cover before we wrap up this podcast on pregnancy is the idea of exercising while pregnant. So I did mention before that I have kept up with my exercise routine throughout my pregnancy. The one thing I will note is that when I first got pregnant, right, I had just come back from vacation and I'd kind of fallen off the wagon, so to speak, which I think is really healthy to do once in a while. And I wasn't in the best shape by any means of my life. So I actually ended up getting in better shape. I'd say it was like the second half of my first trimester. The first couple weeks after I found out I was pregnant, I kind of took it easy. I just went on really long walks with the dogs. I was still teaching yoga, taking a lot of yoga classes. And then by the time I got to that 6-week ultrasound where I heard the baby's heartbeat, that's when I thought, okay, I think I can kick it up a little notch. Although a little part of me was still erring on the side of caution. So I found this really great app that I still use to this day. I think I told you about it, Diana, as well. I'm obsessed with. It's called the Sculpt Society. It's founded by Megan Roop. She herself actually just went through her second pregnancy and has an amazing prenatal program that you can use throughout your pregnancy journey. And say you are kind of feeling like you want to start getting in shape during your second trimester or even your third trimester. You can start at any point in time and it's going to be completely safe. Of course, right? Asterisk, always talk to your healthcare provider. Everyone's pregnancy is different, but I find that to be really great and approachable and something that I couldn't recommend more.
Yeah, I love that. I think, again, like you said, every pregnancy is different. And there are some pregnancies where bed rest is mandatory and that is what you need to do. And that is okay. But yep. I view birth, given that I have a healthy pregnancy and that there's no complications or risks, I view birth as the biggest workout that I'm ever going to go through in my entire life. And I would like to prepare for that accordingly. So if all goes as planned, I do not plan on just sitting out these next 9 months. I have worked out almost every day of my first trimester. I have taken it easier because my heart rate gets up really fast and I'm tired and I'm not lifting quite as heavy. But so far I've been active and it feels really good. It's also really important for my mental health, which I think is something to, just think about. Like, I don't want to I think anxiety is not healthy and that's not healthy in pregnancy. And if I can work through some of that with exercise, then that feels really good for me. But I definitely am going a little bit slower.
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to listen to your body. If you're the type of person like me who likes to enter the pain cave for some mental relief, there's going to be less time spent in the pain cave when you're pregnant. You do have to listen to your body because it's not only your body anymore. It's your body and your baby. right? You're sharing it with someone else these days. So it's not just about what you and you need, which was an important thing that I had to learn throughout my journey.
Seasons of life, seasons of life. One thing that I love that you said, I've heard you say this a couple times, that you were like, listen, this is my time to like really enjoy this stage. And after pregnancy, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life. But like right now, you know, I don't know. I just love that you said that, because it didn't come, I didn't hear it of a place of like that you don't love your body now and that you're like, can't wait to be skinny again. It's just that like there are seasons and you know that you're going to get back into it.
Yep. It goes to the mantra of right now. So right now, I'm loving it. I'm loving my curves. I'm loving all these extra parts of my body and my hips and my breasts and my thighs and my arms and my chubbier cheeks. And my husband is too. So I think that makes a big difference and goes back to the whole throughout this pregnancy journey. It's really great when you have a supportive partner. And I think both of us have been really lucky in that. I guess one other question that we can touch on, Diana, is, you know, how do you go about interacting with a friend who might also be going through their own pregnancy journey and it isn't as smooth as yours? Maybe they don't have a supportive partner. Maybe they unfortunately had to terminate their pregnancy for some reason. You know, how do you handle that with grace?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a small peek into that world dealing with, you know, with going through the infertility world. And I can kind of say, you know, I had a lot of people, including you, that got pregnant while we were dealing with infertility. And I think, you know, it's not totally the same experience, but it is sort of a similar, it's, you know, kind of similar. And I think for me, what was so helpful was people checking in on me, but not just in like after my egg retrieval, you know, which was obviously a big thing, but checking in, like not just on the days that we got bad news, but just kind of checking in throughout the whole process of like, hey, like it's been 4 months, how are you doing? You know, because I think a lot of people are really good at showing up at the beginning and then they're like, okay, I've like checked off my boxes, or life gets busy, and then they stop checking in. So I think that people, like for me, it was really helpful to have people check in, and not just on the bad days or just the good days. And then, you know, I'm in this IVF Facebook group, and there's a lot of things of like, how would you prefer someone tell you about their pregnancy when you're struggling? And I think that this applies for not just the infertility world, but other things too. And a lot of people's preference was that they were texted so that they could have a moment to feel what they needed to feel outside of like being in person when someone's watching your reaction. So I think that also like, if something is going really well for you in your pregnancy and you know someone else is really struggling, and it's something that you want to share, I think texting can actually be a good method, because it gives them the time to process, and then they can show up when they're ready to have that conversation. But I think my biggest thing, is to just check in on people and let them know that you're there, and not in a passive way, but in like an active way. What do you think? What's your advice?
Being there for someone is key. And one of the things I've loved during my pregnancy journey is I'm not in a Facebook group, but I have an app on my phone, which I believe I shared with you. It's called What to Expect. It's a purple icon, and you can join different discussion groups ranging from, you know, if you've suffered a loss or IVF to the month that you're having your baby. So my favorite group is the December 2023 babies, because I'm due in December. And I've just loved it as far as getting peace of mind and having a community and having a place to discuss all these, you know, random questions and things that pop into my mind. And it kind of puts you at ease and doesn't make you feel crazy, you know, all the different things that you might be Googling, and knowing that other women are going through it too. Sharing photos of their bumps, sharing the experience of telling family, planning baby showers, unexpectedly, you know, giving birth on the earlier side, you know, pieces of advice. I think it's great to just have a community and to be supportive and be active on that platform, not just be a listener. So that's something I think I've started to do more later in my pregnancy. Is I kind of was more of a fly on the wall to the app and the community groups. But in the last couple of weeks, I've gotten a lot more engaged, and it's really rewarding.
I love that. Okay, so what if we end? Yours is probably gonna be more interesting than mine is, but what if we end on a fun note of what's your weirdest pregnancy craving?
Oh, mine's caviar.
Ooh, expensive.
That sounds so ridiculously expensive, and it's my husband's fault. I blame him. If you're listening to this, Peter, because I had never, ever eaten caviar in my life. And this poor man made the mistake of force feeding it to me when we were in Japan, right, of all places. And then, the timing, it was bad. And then I think it's like, because it's the salt. I love it. So I love caviar and I love terra musalata. So my husband is Greek, and terra musalata is a fish roe dip with fish roe, like eggs and olive oil and cream, and it is delicious. And I love spreading that on toast. What about you?
I'm still like so early, so I don't know that I've had any weird pregnancy cravings, but I think bread, just white. Like I have a honey whole wheat that I was trying out to see if that would be flavorless enough for me, and I gagged. So like I can't even do honey whole wheat at the moment. I got to do just like plain white bread.
I mean, carbs has been very strong in my journey as well. I had linguine and clams left over as my breakfast this morning. So, that's where I stand. I will say that 7.5 months in, I've had like waves of different things, like caviar. I haven't, albeit had it that much because it's quite expensive. It's kind of reigned true. Like I kind of always want it in the back of my head, something salty. I've craved salty versus sweet. I've had waves of cravings. So I went through a tuna salad phase. I went through a cream cheese and toast phase. I went through an eggs Benedict phase, which you were with me on that journey. I had it like every day for 14 days. It was sick. So I don't know. This current wave is I've kind of been into breakfast food. So I think I'm probably going to make pancakes for dinner tonight. Like I said, I'm enjoying the roller coaster. I'm just kind of like, what do I feel like having tonight? I'm going to have it.
No, I love that. I did have a weird craving for Kraft mac and cheese, but I didn't want the noodles. I wanted the cartoon characters. And I wanted it to be like too watery.
Yes.
And that was like all that I wanted. And now that sounds too strong to me. So I don't know. It's a weird world. Pregnancy is weird. And I am very excited for your next phase, because the next phase is a baby coming out. And I love you. And I love that we get to be so supportive of each other. Yeah, I think that's all I got to say about it. I mean, we went pretty deep here.
We went pretty deep, girl. I mean, I think we're probably going to have to circle back on this once I'm past the finish line. Too. And on the other side, right? And then I think you're going to be there in a few months. So probably next year we can circle back on this and talk a little bit about the fourth trimester, which is something that I think is left out a lot. So I'm looking forward to that. I think there's a lot of good things to come. There's definitely going to be some sleep deprivation involved, but right? I think you're never ready. Right. And you kind of you got to go with the flow.
And just to end these are our stories and our experiences, and that how we feel and what we do does not need to apply to you. And that's okay. And everyone gets to make their own choices, and everyone, if you feel different, I mean, Elara and I have pretty different experiences, but if you land somewhere in the middle and you don't feel any of these things, that's okay too. And that your pregnancy and your experience is valid.
And if there's anything, you feel like we didn't get to touch on today that you'd love to hear when we circle back on the pregnancy topic, drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Just a reminder, Diane and I are not medical experts. We are not your healthcare provider. This is just us sharing our experience. This is by no means certified medical advice. So if you have any questions, concerns, considerations about your own pregnancy, getting pregnant, fertility, talk to your healthcare provider about it.
Sip, savor, and live well with new episodes of the Matcha Guardians every Wednesday. Follow our show for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. Leave your questions and comments below. Find us on Instagram at The Matcha Guardians, or click on matcha.com.